This is trickier for me because I'm definitely not your poster child on, sticking through the really tough times.
That's okay.
I am great at leaving. The honesty, I think even if they're little lies, if they just keep happening, to me, it almost feels like there's a level of trust missing, not from me to them because they're lying, from them to me. I would also say, I feel like everyone always says infidelity. Personally, I don't know that that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, obviously, I think it would be a problem, and I totally understand why people leave. I just think everyone has different values and different experiences, which makes them hold things with a different weight.
Correct. We're getting towards the tail end of the conversation, but I want to ask you again. So, thinking about the idea of if you're in a relationship already, right? What are some thoughts about any particular situation or circumstance that if it were to happen, you feel like this is my either deal breaker, my breaking point where I can no longer stay in this relationship?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. I also, I think there are a lot of things. This is trickier for me because I'm definitely not your poster child on, sticking through the really tough times.
That's okay.
I am great at leaving. But I will say, again, I've had good relationships. I don't regret any of them. And I feel like I made the right decision each time by leaving. I think there are a few big things for me. One is, feels so obvious, right? The honesty. I think even if they're little lies, if they just keep happening, to me, it almost feels like there's a level of trust missing, not from me to them because they're lying, from them to me. If I feel like someone keeps lying to me, it feels like, why do you not trust me to hold the truth? It almost feels like you're trying to, it feels disrespectful, like you don't think I can handle it in a sense. And I just feel if you can lie frequently about little things, the big things, right, then you can lie about. And I feel like I'm an open book and I'm very honest. And so when I feel like someone isn't giving me that same effort back, right, and it's not easy to be honest all the time. It's really freaking hard. And it's a part of growing up and learning that, like, if you care about this person, they deserve your honesty. And so again, that whole matching, if it's not being matched, that's a reason to leave.
Respect.
I would also say, I feel like everyone always says infidelity. Personally, I don't know that that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, obviously, I think it would be a problem, and I totally understand why people leave. I just think everyone has different values and different experiences, which makes them hold things with a different weight.
Correct.
So for me, I've grown up with a lot of financial insecurity, and finances are very important to me. I've worked very hard to get to where I'm at and to be comfortable and to provide for myself. And so a financial betrayal, oddly enough, I think would impact me more than maybe a physical portrayal. I think I've just also had a different experience with the physicality part of relationships, having started dating so young. I know a world in which something can just be physical, and so I would be more hurt from a emotional infidelity than a physical one, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, because that to me is you're missing something emotionally, an intimacy, a vulnerable, emotional, psychological connection that is the most important thing to me in a relationship. So if you're seeking that elsewhere, that is the biggest betrayal, I'd say. So yeah, financial, if you were like lying about your finances, stealing money, something like that, that would really impact me, especially if we're trying to build a life together, right? Because it's supposed to be both of us putting in that effort. And so if it came out that you were being shady about something, that would be difficult for me.
Okay. No, and I think that that's fair. I actually would make the point that I've thought about in recent years that if you're going for the traditional perspective, that a woman essentially is going to be, not that she's a wholly dependent, but she's definitely going to care about your level of financial stability within yourself, because to a certain degree, she, and I think it does go both ways, but for the most part, I would say, I think she's sort of betting on you that you have your stuff together, that you know the direction that your life is going to go in, because she may not. want to work for the rest of her life, or she may not want to work as hard the rest of her life, if she knows that that level of stability can be maintained, that you are sound-minded, that you've demonstrated it, throughout maybe a few years. And I think that provides that level of comfort for a lot of women out there that may seek that out. But at the same time, like you talked about stealing money, I absolutely agree. Like that to me is an absolute no-go. You can't trust it. You can't trust if you're doing it, especially if you're trying to build a life together. But I really want to go back to, because I like the way you gave the nuanced answer, physical versus emotional infidelity. And obviously we don't always define these things. So I think that's also important. Like in your relationship, you need to define these terms, because everybody doesn't come into them with the same definition. That's very important. But you did. So you mentioned, so maybe if there's something emotional missing from the relationship, I don't want you seeking that out elsewhere, because that's going to sting and hurt and probably cause a lot more damage. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Versus physically, you're like, that doesn't necessarily reflect as poorly upon you or as on the relationship. And I actually think that makes more sense to me. It's not a PSA to go do it. Right. So I'm not trying to give people a license, right? Because that's something like you guys talk that out and figure out what works for you. But I am saying, I think from a nuanced perspective, the way you lay that out there, I can appreciate that. I think the emotional side is something that even men, we notice that if we see that like our woman's getting like distant from us, and maybe she used to talk to us about things and now she's not. And if you find out that she has like a male friend that she's starting to talk about these things, I think our sort of territorial nature is absolutely going to kick into overdrive and be like, why are you telling him these things? Like, I'm your partner. You should be talking to me about it. I don't know why you feel like that's appropriate, but that's not okay. And I can imagine, based on what you said, a woman might feel the same way. I don't want you confiding in her. If you have issues, I want you to come talk to me, especially if it has to do with me, right? I want you to come talk to me about it. Let us try to figure that out. If it was maybe family or like a loved one, maybe there's a little more leeway depending on the relationship. But you're talking about like maybe a colleague, a coworker, high school friend, whatever. I absolutely agree with you. I think that can cause immense damage and can actually set up, from a man's perspective, can set you up for physical infidelity, because now you're starting to develop a real connection. So then that kind of starts to pull you away from your partner, and it starts maybe making you entertain the idea of being with this new person.
Yeah. And I think really it differs from person to person, because for people who did not have the experience that I had growing up, sex can mean a lot. It can mean everything. And so it is very valid that for some people, if you are physically unfaithful once, it's over. And hey, power to you. It's what the parameters you set in your relationship should be respected. And if it's not respected, do what you got to do, boo. That's just how, I perceive it, to where I can much easier wrap my mind around y'all were out drinking one night and you made a bad mistake and you're never going to do it again. I'd be more forgiving of that than if it's an emotional infidelity. I'm assuming that there is time being put into it, right? And that's what it is. It's the time that's being spent away in a different, away from me. And another thing I will comment on, with the financial thing is, again, just varies so much person to person, because growing up, you can ask my whole family, I always thought I would be the breadwinner. And I said the only way I will have children is if my partner is a stay-at-home father. So I was always the reverse. And I always felt like I want to be the stable one and the grounded one, because I can depend on myself. I was never comfortable with the idea of putting all of your just the risk of depending on another person. So it doesn't matter if I'm dating a woman, if I'm dating a man, that doesn't matter. I trust myself more than I trust anyone else. And so I was really raised in, you provide for yourself. Whereas, so my perspective is, for me, it's not even necessarily his stability. I mean, I've dated broke musicians. I've dated the brokest of the broke. I've dated very rich people. That's not about, as long as I'm good, it's the lying that gets me. Whereas I think, to your point, like my sister wants to be a stay-at-home mom. So like in the example you described, that would make more sense in her circumstance, right? To where she wants to be shown that you're honest and have that stability so that she can have that. That's not even what it is for me. Sure. It's more so just the honesty and my personal relationship with finances that come from my childhood.
Okay. No, and I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, it's based on, what we live, what we experience. I mean, even for me, I would say financial stability is very important to me, because we didn't grow up that well off financially. And so I know that I definitely took on that responsibility very seriously, of trying to be a saver and learn to be an investor and learn to plan ahead for things and not be like an impulsive spender, so to speak. And then as I've gotten older, I've also thought, if I wanted, and just speaking from my perspective, and for a lot of guys that I have spoken to, like if I want a woman to depend on me, number one, I must be dependable.
Right.
So there must be aspects about the way I carry myself that kind of give the impression, honestly, that you can bet on me. Because I carry myself in such a way that I know that it is a lot for somebody to want to put that, not the onus, but to put that level of trust into you to say like, you're going to help make sure the ship stays upright, right? We're not going to fall into ruin. And I know that, like you said, everybody's going to have different outlooks on that. But I think for those of us that do subscribe to that, do want that, then we need to make sure that we're doing absolutely our part. Number one, to walk the walk, and then be able to embody that and demonstrate that to somebody so that they can see that and hopefully feel confident in you, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, and if I can just say, I cannot imagine being in a more vulnerable position. So I think also just understanding that, like even myself, like gender aside, if you and I both plan on being the successful one, the financially stable one,
Sure.
right? Like the amount of vulnerability for someone to financially depend on you, that is debilitating. If for any reason you or myself switch up, they have nothing.
Right.
The weight of that, I think we have to be conscientious of and like
Sure.
carry with us on a day-to-day, because that is so much trust that human being is putting into us, and it doesn't always work out well.
Oh, of course. Of course.
And so respecting that level of vulnerability that they're showing up to the relation, it's not as simple as just like, I'm just gonna sit back and they'll pay for everything. Like that is a level of giving yourself up,
Yeah.
that we should really respect,
No, I agree. And I would add something to that. Even if I had somebody, let's say, that was dependent on me, like not a child, a partner, I would think this is my opinion, I would want to prepare them for the eventuality of me not being here.
Exactly.
Right. So like, I would not want somebody, I would be fine with the depending on me part. I'm okay with that. I feel like I was raised for that. But I would want to know, for me, it's big on kind of like, even from a parenting perspective, I want to know that you're going to be okay when I'm not here. And so to me, like that's that middle ground that I would walk, to say, to try to calm those concerns that you may have about if I left you, or what the situation may be. Like, number one, I want you to be good, right? I want you to be okay, and I want to put certain conditions in place so that if that unfortunate time does happen, you're not feeling completely blindsided as if you have no idea what to do.
And a lot of people don't think like that, and that is really scary.
Yeah.
That's really scary. I can't imagine anything scarier. I just think about my own life and like I have to have 4 months rent put in my savings because I could lose my job tomorrow, right? And like, if you don't come from a family that can just hand you $10,000 to like, which most of us don't,
No.
I would be so terrified and emotionally distraught that it holds weight.